Good morning and welcome. My name is Faz. I run DX3, and this is part of our platform called DX3 Pulse, where we host a number of thought leaders to talk about different parts of technology and how they're impacting decision making and how they're impacting retail and marketing industry. And today we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic called data for dollars. Everybody talks about data, and but how do you use that data? What's the value of that data? Like, how do you take raw data and get something out of it? So ROI out of it. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Peter Madsen. Peter is a dynamic professional known for innovative approach known for his innovative approach to harnessing untapped data sources to extract valuable insight and predictive information. With expertise in decision making and strategic data analysis, he drives positive outcomes for ongoing business operations. His skill set encompasses machine learning, data visualization, and management of large data sets. Currently, Currently, Peter is serving as the Director of Data Services Calligo. Peter excels at bridging the realms of marketing, sales, and delivery. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Faz. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. So, without wasting too much time, let's just get into it and figure out what is this whole data thing that people keep talking about and how can we make something out of it. So, let me just get into it. Say, what is the general landscape and how one should go about how should one go about building data framework?
Yeah, so the landscape is pretty broad right now, and we expect it to continue to be, right? There's just a lot of different levels of data maturity that companies have around the globe, all the way from needing to first start collecting their data, being able to understand it, process it, store it, and then really being able to use it to make decisions. And so we see companies that are all over on the spectrum there. And generally, what I like to do when I'm talking about creating a data environment is I kind of split it into four different areas. So there's two of them that are focused on kind of the past, what has happened, and two that are future focused. So the first level, right, where companies really, when you really start getting into your data environment and building things out, um, it's the analytic layer, right? So it's looking at how do we pull all our data together, how do we understand it, how do we see it, um, and then interrogating it. You come with it. You're not looking at specific questions yet. You're saying I need a place where I can understand everything that I can look at, and so you go through and start building that out. Then you get to the operational layer where you're looking at specific reports. You're saying, this is what I'm trying to do. Let me measure it. And so you can go in there and start measuring what has happened. You start asking specific questions, right? Especially in the marketing and retail space, right? Like this is going to be like, what products am I selling? Or how effective are my marketing campaigns? What's my click-through rate, right? Looking at your operational um, KPIs there. And then the next level, right, when you start looking at future focused, we really have two different areas, the tactical and strategic level. So tactical level is focused on short-term decisions. What decisions do I need to make today or this week or this month to really change what's the outcome? So this is going to be in the middle of a marketing campaign, looking at when should I send out that next email? Who should I target? Um, or if I am looking at remarketing to people who um, have engaged with content previously. And then the last one's the strategic layer, and that's really the long-term vision, looking at what decisions do I need to make in this quarter or this year to affect the future state. And so this is really on that kind of planning level. Um, and so getting companies to go from those kind of analytic and operational reports into tactical and strategic ones, that's where we really uh, focus on.
Thank you very much. I mean, I guess one of the reasons why we wanted to have this was to get a better understanding of what data is, but also to get a better understanding of what Calligo does and how does it go about doing it. So I wanted to get a sense of uh, what kind of clients have you worked with in the past? Like who are your clients? Is that something you can talk about and we can get a little bit into that for a moment?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I've worked with a lot of different clients. As a company, we span really small, medium businesses all the way up to enterprise. So I've worked personally a lot with Microsoft, and also with smaller companies like Transforming Age, Living Spaces. I guess Living Spaces isn't that small, but HEB, Home Depot, right? A lot of companies in the retail space. Um, for Microsoft, right, just give you a couple examples of things that we've done for them. We built out for them a model looking at their marketing activities and looking at um, what their Azure products that they're selling to customers to help them identify what's the customer journey, what's that next product that they should be marketing to them or talking to them on the sales side, what products sell well together, and building out models to predict that for them. Um, yeah, built out a lot of different models, different analytic pipelines, different data warehouses for customers. Um, so it varies widely from customer to customer and based on their needs, but uh, it's very interesting.
Well, thank you. So, all right. So, I wanted to get a little bit of a sense of how, for example, like how does this work in terms of the approach to building a dashboard and how many components, because I mean we all everyone is talking about, well, I want to have a dashboard, I want a data dashboard. So like take us through it. What is that? Like how do you build it? What are the things that you need to do with it? And obviously I understand that you or Calligo has a like a methodology. I think it's discover, draw, develop. Then are you able to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple different things that go into this, right? So we've developed a strategy or a methodology called Discover, Draw, Develop for our dashboard build out process. And what it really focuses on is first discovering what it is that the business stakeholders, the subject matter experts know, and really aligning that all the way up through the business, right? Um, and so we take the time to start at the very beginning. Uh, we take some time to start at the very beginning, really understanding what data do you have, how are you trying to use it, what decisions are you trying to make, so that we know before we even start building out dashboards, before we start creating the measurements and the measures, before we start really driving on to like the building part of it, that what we're doing is going to have an impact on the business. And that impact is something that is measurable, that people are going to use it. Um, and that this isn't, just another report that's going to get built out and then thrown into the void. Because we've seen a lot of that happen over the last 15 years or so, where companies, you're either buying some pre-built reports or you're um, talking about, okay, we really want to have a report that does X, Y, or Z, right? And then you build it out and they say, you give it to the end user and they say, oh, well, I don't actually need this, right? And so the discover, draw, develop methodology is to answer those sorts of questions, right? First, sit down with all of the stakeholders and the subject matter experts, say, what are you trying to accomplish? What decisions do you need to make? What data do you need to support those decisions? And we create a whole document that maps out um, exactly that. And then we can share that, get feedback on it. And then once we have that done, we can go into the draw step before we actually build anything in Power BI or Tableau or any other BI tools. We're going to draw it out and say, here's how we're going to display this information to help you make these decisions. And this really helps us close that gap between the technical and non-technical stakeholders who are going to be looking at this data and saying, okay, well, if we display it this way, that doesn't make sense for what I'm trying to do. Or that, oh, this really actually does help me get a better idea of what's going on. And then once we've planned everything, we've drawn it out, then we actually go into the build phase. And most of our builds look extremely close to what we've drawn out beforehand, right? And so we can streamline that process into the actual development of it, and know beforehand that this is going to be effective, that we have the right tools in place to be able to measure this and to be able to actually help you make decisions.
Now if I may sort of play a devil's advocate and just ask it bluntly, why should anyone work with Calligo? Or why should someone choose to work with you guys?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that we differentiate on is our people and our process. So there's a lot of things that can be done in pre-built environments, right? Like, especially I think in the marketing and retail space, there are a lot of tools out there that exist that are going to say, here are reports that you need, or here are 30 reports that can be built out on this data. Um, and a lot of times, right, when you get these reports that aren't custom to your business, that are um, really just, hey, like, these are reports that everyone kind of maybe wants or needs, or we've seen people use in the past, um, you can really struggle to get buy-in from the end users who are going to use those. Or they don't quite answer the question that you need. So then you have to take that report and you have to combine it with other data sources, or other um, tools, right? And take that to make your decisions. And so what we're going to do, right, is we go in, we follow our process, we make sure, hey, before we actually build anything, that what we're going to build is going to add value to your business. Uh, and then we work with you along that whole process, and we help you get adoption into your environments, right? So instead of something that is the same for everyone, we're building out things that actually drive your decision making process.
So we have a question. So, Peter, I'm just going to ask that question. So, Rehan from Toronto, I know that he's from Toronto. He's asking that, okay, is this data from Google Analytics data, or we can use other sources of data too? If yes, what other sources of data can be used and how?
Yeah, so we can definitely connect into Google Analytics data. We generally, so a lot of what our process is, because we do end-to-end data um, analytics, right? And so we can pull in data into a data warehouse for you. Um, a lot of that, what that's going to look like, right, depends on what exactly you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. So Google Analytics data we use for sure. We've pulled in a lot of other data, like we can even pull in like flat files, put it into a single data warehouse for you, model it for you into a way that um, you can either query the tables to get the information that you need, if that's where you're at as a business, or if we could build other reports on top of that as well. Build out automation pipelines to put it into other um, tools, right? If you have a CRM that the data needs to flow into, we can do that too.
And Rehan has a follow up question. He's asking, okay, are these reports exclusive to Calligo, or is the value addition reading these reports and suggesting right strategy?
So I guess I'm like, whenever we generate something for a client, that is theirs, right? And so like we do we can do like data strategy assessments. We can
Yep.
do machine learning planning, right? Where we go in, we have a process called data science by design, which is pretty similar to the discover, draw, develop, but focused on the machine learning methodology. Um, so whenever we build out any of those are the clients, right? And so we can go in, we can say, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you would do it. And we would um, give those architecture diagrams, give the methodologies, technology stack to the customer and say, we can do this for you, or you can do it yourself, or find someone else to do it. Um, so there's value in just doing that at the base level, and then there's also value in, okay, well, let's actually partner with Calligo. Let's build out these reports, and let's have the consultants come in and start making suggestions to us for how to actually take this data, turn it into action, and start driving value.
So, what kind of things people should keep in mind when they're trying to set up sort of a data driven processes or framework?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it all starts with having your data in a place where you can start actioning on it. Um, so if you have, I mean, one of the things that we see is that people have data in a lot of different places. And as organizations grow, parts of those organizations are using data to make decisions in different ways than other parts, like this, potentially even the same data, right? And so pulling all that data together, putting it in a warehouse, um, and then aligning on, okay, here is what this data means, right? Getting that documentation, and then aligning on, here's how we're using this data to make decisions. That's huge for the growth of organizations, to be able to have the same language internally for how they talk about the data, have a good understanding of where this data is coming from, know where some of the weaknesses in the data are. Um, if, for instance, some of the data comes from manual entry, right, then there's some question to how accurate it is. And if you're using that to make decisions, right, you need to know that. Um, and so having clear, documented, here's where everything's coming from, here's what it means, all the way in through, here's the decisions that we're trying to make, and the data that supports those decisions, right? Having that transparency, that level of kind of shared knowledge is really important.
And I mean, obviously, the core of this thing, everybody wants to know that, okay, we hear so much about data, and everyone is talking about data, and there's so much data around us. But then, how does that help us increase profitability? Like at the end of the day, like I'm a business owner, what I really, really care about is that, okay, if I'm going to invest some money, if I'm going to work with someone, is it going to increase my ROI? Is it going to increase my profitability? So, I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes it's really hard to measure how our actions that we're driving at kind of relate to ROI, or um, increase our profitability as a company. But that's one of the things that we do at the beginning, right? In our discover phase, we're sitting down with you. We're saying, okay, what is it that you're trying? What is the decision that you're trying to make? What is the expected outcome of that decision? And how is that going to impact your business? And then how can we measure that? So, for instance, one of the models that we've built out for a customer, right, was looking at their marketing activities related to event registrations. And so we built out a model that would predict for them, here are here's how many people are going to register for this event with, you know, the timeline. Um, and then we, once that model was running and was predicting, and we had solid predictions on how many people would register, then we built a secondary model on top of that that would say, here are the activities that are going to lead to the most registrations. So it did a what if analysis on the data, and it would let you be able to go in and say, okay, if I change this, or if I, if I send out an email 2 weeks earlier, or if I send 2 emails in this week, or if I change the content, it would suggest to you, here are the things that are going to increase the registrations at this event. And so it went from kind of this operational view where you're measuring, okay, how many people have registered? What is my prediction of that? Into a really tactical report that said, knowing that, what should I do to increase registrations? Um, and so registrations, right, don't necessarily, right, tie directly to ROI, but it is a measurable increase that you can say, okay, this is the effect that this is having. And then there's some knock-on effects there, right, for people who are registering to go to events that are then purchasing your products. Um, Tying those together can be difficult, but when you start then building out a reporting environment behind it, you can see, okay, here we have this event, and in the 6 month lag behind it, here's what we're seeing as the impact on sales.
So, when people are building, how do you build sort of data trust? Like what are the things we're looking at, from sort of source of data, data maturity, transparency? So like, how do people get sort of build the data trust?
Yeah, and so data trust can be a really hard one to build out. Part of it comes down to, what does your data environment look like, and where's your data coming from? So one of the things that we start out with, right, is looking at each of your data sources, going through and identifying, okay, what are the data sources? How do those then flow into your data warehouse? What transformations are happening there? what is the level of accuracy of this data? Is it all automated data? Is it manually entered data? Is there some variance in it that is going to affect how much you trust that data? And then in the next layer, right, once you have everything pulled in, there's going to be some transformations that happen there. There's going to be some measures that sit on top of that, and having a clear documentation for what are these measures, how are they being calculated, um, and what is the definition of them, and sitting down and saying, okay, this is how this is defined. We have a data dictionary that we've built out. Um, do you agree with this? Do you disagree with it? How are you using this to make decisions? And then documenting that as well. So really, it comes down to how well do you know and understand your data environment? How well do you trust it? Um, I mean, I guess that is how you build trust, right? Is understanding what it is, what are its limitations, and what decisions can you make from this data.
And can you talk a little bit about in terms of types of dashboards and what are they and how are they used?
Yeah, yeah. So I talked about this a little bit. So again, I split it up into generally four different types of dashboards. Analytic dashboards. These are kind of traditionally what you would see Excel doing. So they're really focused on understanding the data, asking it questions, and those questions aren't set. So they can change from day to day, and it's up to whoever is using that report to make the story of that report. So you're going to see a lot of slicers, you're going to see a lot of filters, um, you're going to see a lot of different ways for combining and looking at data, uh, and not a single set way. The next layer, right, is operational. So this is where you have a specific set of data, specific set of questions, and you're trying to be able to look at this and understand what has been done in this time period. So, right, if it's a week or a month or quarter, year. Um, and then within that, right, you have your key metrics. So you're going to be looking at, okay, how many marketing campaigns do I have? What is the click through rate on each of those? Um, are these above or below a threshold? Right. And so it's going to be looking at your performance over time, looking back. The next level, right, is when you start getting into tactical. And so here you're going to be a little bit more forward looking, but it's still focused in the short term. And you're asking the question, what decisions should I make today to improve my outcomes? And so, right, if we look at an operational report, if I want to make this a tactical report, I'm going to be looking at, okay, what are my marketing campaigns that are active? What are the click through rates on those? And the ones that are below my threshold, what should I be doing or what do I need to change in order to increase that click through rate? Um, and so there might be some predictions on there that say, here's what we expect the click through rate to be, and a model that says, okay, here are the things that you can adjust in order to improve your click through rate. There might, you know, be other analytics that you see that go along with that that you can dive into and say, okay, this is um, what I'm seeing within this campaign, and here's what I can change to improve that. And then on the final level, the strategic reports. These are really high level, focused on long term decision making. And so this would be looking across potentially all of your marketing campaigns. What does their spend look like? What is how does that correlate to increased revenue? And are there ways that we can increase our overall revenue by changing how we look at marketing? Looking at cyclical cycles, so looking at seasonality, um, or quarterly based changes that might happen there.
So, I mean, it's effectively, if I understand it correctly, there is your short term, which is day to day, and then there is your
Mm-hmm.
strategic, which is just setting a direction 3, 5 years down the road, and then you've got exploration element of it, which is your analytics, and then you've got operational stuff. So, I mean, analytics is obviously looking at sort of at the lowest tier, just looking at data constantly and understanding any trends that have an impact. And then your operational is sort of monitoring on the day-to-day basis to make sure that, okay, the short term gets done what it's supposed to do and it stays aligned with the long term.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so before I get into anything, so the question was that does Calligo act more like as a consultant on a continuous basis, or is it that you teach your clients to stand on their own feet after some times and they can do this on their own without needing Calligo?
Yeah. So it really depends on the needs of the business. And a lot of instances, right, we've worked with clients, especially on uh, more on the smaller side, who, right, like they need someone with more experience to come in and set up their environment for them, but their desire is to be able to take over that environment once they're able to hire someone, once they're able to onboard them, train them up, to be able to manage that. And so we partner with organizations to do that. Um, we've done that with a number of different organizations, right? Where we go in, we build out the pipelines, we build out the data warehouse and the first layer of reports, and then they'll bring on a data engineer or a data analyst that'll come in and either take over part of it or all of it. Um, and it's we train them. We say, okay, like here is how our pipelines work. Here is how this data is being pulled. Here's how you can take it over, and then passing over the credentials and um, getting them set up to run there. So we've definitely operated in that way in the past as well. A lot of the times, especially in the larger businesses, we're on long-term contracts, right, where we're acting as consultants in that to help them drive their business objectives for a year or 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is there. And then sometimes we're also just brought in to say, okay, I have a report that needs to get built out. um, can you do that? And we'll engage with the client for 3 months or 6 months and build out whatever needs to be built out, and then train them on how to use it and pass it back off.
Now, just sort of our curiosity, what state do you need sort of the data to be in terms of, like, I'm guessing, do you, if someone has data, I don't know, in an Excel sheet, is that what you're looking to use, or do you want it to be in a certain specific format? That, okay, well, I mean, that kind of defines
Yeah.
the almost sort of, well, on one end of the spectrum is businesses like myself who are like, well, I've got nothing, like, everything I keep is on Google and Excel. So is that something that someone like me can go and do and say, hey, I want to work with you guys? Or is that, okay, before we get into the race, we need to prepare you to get to a starting point?
hmm Yeah. So, I mean, the nice thing is, right, we are end to end. And so we can help companies that haven't set up their data environment. I will say that sometimes we talk with companies that are saying, like, hey, I need to have a tactical report, right, on how to make decisions right now. I don't have any data pulled in. And so that can be really difficult, right? Because what we need to do is go and start building out the pipelines, build out that data, pull it in historically, and start building the trust, right? Um, and if you don't have that data that you really know, understand, trust, it's really hard to get to tactical reports. And so starting out with, okay, let's have an analytic report, or let us do the analysis and make sure that there is trust in this data. And then let's build out an operational report, and then talk about, okay, how are we using this data to make decisions to build a tactical report. So to answer your question, right, as long as there's data that can be accessed and pulled in a repeatable way, we can work with that. um,
Makes sense. So, Peter, how did you end up in this field? Like,
yeah. So I used to be a math teacher. So I went and I have a degrees in math and a master's in teaching. And I taught math for a number of years. And then I was moving across the state with my wife, who was starting medical school. And I knew we were going to be moving around a lot. So I decided to look into different things that I could do, and found a program in data analytics that I'd always been very curious about. Like, I'd been doing a lot of analytics in my teaching on student performance and looking at, okay, what are the indicators that actually are predictive of whether or not a student is going to pass the class or do well, right? Um, Specifically looking at how homework correlates to test scores was a pretty interesting one. Um, so I hopped in that program and then ended up getting a job in data analytics and working for a retail company, online retail company selling primarily on Amazon, but also on other third party marketplaces. And, just loved it. It was great being able to build out reports and being able to really look at, okay, how can we use this data to run our business better? And, talking with the executives of the company there and reporting that data up and saying, okay, like one of the things that is um, really hurting us here is that we have a lot of inventory that we're storing for too long, and so we need to start liquidating this, right? And then saying, okay, well, let's do that, and then seeing the resulting um, impact on the business, right? And then eventually, right, moving into working at Calligo, and worked in a lot of different roles here. From starting in data analytics and then moving into our data science team, leading our data science team, and now working across all of our services. So uh, it's been a pretty wild journey.
Well, it sounds interesting. Well, thanks a lot, Peter, and thank you very much, everyone who joined in today. Appreciate you guys making an effort. I mean, this is sort of data is the 21st century's gold. Like that's what it is. So obviously, that's becoming increasingly a competitive advantage. So I want to thank Peter for his time and for the insight he's provided, and Calligo, who've been supporters of DX3. Thank you very much and appreciate everyone who took the time to be in this today. But thank you very much. Appreciate you all. Thanks a lot. Take care.